When El Mayo Zambado was captured, kidnapped, and then taken to the United States, it took a month and a half for there really to be a fighting between the existing cartels. And so I think that it's still early to know if something like that is going to happen in Jalisco or not. I knew about people related with the cartels kidnapping members from the opposition for the weekend, for them not to mobilize people, for them to prevent them from voting. This is not gossip. These are facts.
This could be extremely profitable. I mean, this is something that would rival the actual drug business that the cartels are operating.
It's a very, very profitable business. That could not have happened without the involvement of different levels of the Mexican government. And unfortunately, some of the witnesses that knew about this process have suspiciously been killed. We don't want a government that is in any fact, in any way, being suspected of being associated with cartels. That's terrible. We always say this phrase, no, you need two to tango. Well, sometimes I think that you need two in order to be able to make international crime.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Francis. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end, my friends. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. And once again, before I get into today's topic and with a very special guest, I want to thank all of you again who have been really coming on as subscribers as a birthday present for me. For those of you that are just tuning in, it's my birthday in May, and my team has said, let's try to hit 2 million subscribers. We're very close by the time your birthday comes on May 27th. And I've announced this 2 or 3 times, and there's been a flood of subscribers coming in. So I want to thank you all very much. It's really kind of overwhelming to see people just really contribute to my birthday. So thank you very much for that. And all those of you who have been my loyal subscribers for so many years, I really appreciate that, because I wouldn't have a platform if it wasn't for all of you. And I'm very aware of that, and I'm very appreciative of that. Okay, my guest today, I want to get his name right, is a very special guest. His name is Enrique Octavio de la Madrid Cordero. And this gentleman, he is the son of a former president of Mexico back in the 80s. And Enrique was also a federal deputy, a member of Congress. He was the Secretary of Tourism for Mexico from 2015 to 2018. And he held very high positions there and is very aware of what's going on between the cartels and the Mexican government. And I really, really appreciate his perspective. He's very knowledgeable, very well balanced, and really approaches this the right way. I really believe that. And I think you're going to enjoy this interview. And listen, we here in America, we're very, very concerned about what's going on in Mexico. I love Mexico. I love the Mexican people. I love traveling there. You've heard this. I go to Puerto Vallarta quite a bit. And we just want to know that it's safe. We understand the issues with the cartels. We understand that there's corruption in the Mexican government. We get all of that. From our perspective, we want to know that it's safe. We want to know how we can travel there with a clear head. That's what it's all about. And I'm sure there's people from all around the world that travel to Mexico that feel the same. So I'm having these guests on in light of what happened a couple of weeks ago with El Mencho, his capture and then his killing. And obviously, there was unrest there for a couple of days, even in the town of Puerto Vallarta, which has always been safe. I travel there quite a bit. We have a condo there. You know, we're all concerned about this, and they are our neighbors. Like Canada to the north, they're our neighbors to the south. And we should have a great relationship with Mexico. We really should. And I think we do. You know, Trump recently has named the cartels as terrorists. I like what Enrique has said. He does welcome help from America in that regard. And I appreciate him hearing that. He's also very intelligent in the way he approaches that help and what kind of help we should be giving. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview with Enrique. So listen, it's important. You know, go right to the end. It's not that long. But listen to what he has to say, because like I said, these are our neighbors. And it's in everybody's best interest if we have a proper relationship with them, if we can travel back and forth. And I'm going to say this, and he agrees with me, and he said it. The way to decrease drugs coming over our border is to decrease the demand for it here in America. That's what's important. We need to really deal with that here in the United States. Another thing you're going to hear, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm going to go at the end of this conversation, you're going to hear a lot that I have to say about something that he talked about that was extremely interesting and very close to home for me. No further delay. Here's my very special guest, Enrique. Okay, Enrique, it's really a pleasure to meet you and have you on as a guest. I've been looking forward to this. I know you have a wealth of information about a topic that's very interesting here, not only for myself but for many, many people in the United States that love traveling to Mexico and just want to be up on what's going on there. And before I ask you anything, I want to get into something. I had a guest on yesterday and we were talking about the relationship between the cartels and the Mexican government. And some of the things that she said really shocked me. And I didn't realize what she stated was the level of cooperation and corruption among the cartels and the government. And it's really, it's quite disturbing to hear. um, and I would really love for you to clarify that for us here. I mean, what is the level of corruption? Because I also asked her, and again, I'll say why. I asked her if the Mexican government just wants to peacefully coexist with the cartels, so there's not a lot of unrest in the country. And she said, Michael, it's worse than that. They are one and the same. And that just struck me. What could you say about that?
All right, people always ask me, Michael, you're Italian. Why Armenian wine? Let me tell you something. Armenia has been making wine for over 6,200 years. Before the French, before the Italians even before the pyramids. When I tasted the wine, I knew we had a hit. FranzisWine.com. Try it yourself. You'll definitely understand. Let's get back to the video.
Well, I think that unfortunately, in many parts of Mexico and probably at different levels between of the government, that's a fact. For example, the state of Sinaloa. In the state of Sinaloa, I think that the relationship between the government and the cartels is really strong. Is very strong. There's this thing that happened in Mexico, which is called a huachicol fiscal, which means that many gasolines were imported from the States, by the way, were imported to Mexico, but without paying taxes. They just have to declare that instead of gasoline, it's a different product. So they saved what we call the yepes, a type of tax. And then it has become extremely profitable to import gasoline, pay no taxes, and sell it at a lower price than the gasoline that pays taxes. That's a huge, huge amount of money. And that could not have happened without the involvement of the Mexican government. That's what you call fiscal. Imagine for you to be able to do that, the people at the border had to participate. The government at the levels of the roads had to participate. People at the Pemex level had to realize Pemex is a Mexican state-owned company that sells the oil and produces petroleum in Mexico. Should participate, and we know because it's a fact that even people at the level of the Marine in Mexico participated. So yes, the answer is in Mexico. Unfortunately, there are certain levels of government that are basically involved and associated with the cartels in Mexico.
You know, Enrique, this is very interesting to me because I don't know if you know my background, but many, many years ago, over 35 years ago, I was involved in a scheme to defraud the government out of tax, our government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. So when I hear that, it certainly rings a bell for me. Who would it be in the United States that would be importing that? Who would they importing it from
No, in
in
the case of
Mexico?
the United States, we would be buying the gasoline from the United States. So basically,
Okay.
they buy the gasoline from the United States. They import it into Mexico. I think. I mean, I read before talking with you, and when I read this about you yesterday, it's basically that. No, it's
Hmm.
basically a way of evading the tax. No, the taxes. And of course, if you're not paying taxes, then you can sell that product a much cheaper price. And that is what is happening in Mexico. So I think it's a similar scheme. In this case, it's not paying the taxes at the frontier level. No, that's where you do not pay those taxes. And so it's a very, very profitable business. And
Wow.
again, that could not have happened without the involvement of different levels of the Mexican government. And it's a fact that people in the Marine participated, and unfortunately, some of the witnesses that knew about this process have suspiciously been killed. Suspiciously been killed.
Well, Enrique, I can tell you this because of the volume of gas that would be imported, this could be extremely profitable. I mean, this is something that would rival the actual drug business that the cartels are operating. Extremely profitable.
It is very profitable. Some people in Mexico, we say something like 500 million thousand pesos. In dollars, it should be something like $40 billion, 40,
Yes.
40. And so, as you say, it's very profitable. And the problem is, from my point of view, in Mexico, the problem with the cartels is that they are not only focused in drugs anymore. That's a big problem. No, they're not only focused in drugs, they participate in many other activities. Nonetheless, drugs, fentanyl, and this type of schemes have given them an additional amount of money for them to be able to do some other things. So even though they're not only focused in drugs today, or they're not only focused in this type of activities, it is nonetheless very clear that if a reduction of these resources takes place, the cartels would be weakened. So it's very important to fight against these issues, both drugs and also these kind of schemes.
Let me ask, do you think anyone in the United States, in government capacity here would have to also know what was going on with the importation of gas?
I guess so. And I guess, yes, I guess so. I mean, it's inevitable to think. Uh, I tend to talk about more my side than the side of the U.S., but it's obvious that some people are also benefited from these issues in on the side of the United States, and I think that the United States government has information about this, and I think that the government is also now providing information to go against this type of schemes. But yes, I mean, it's like we always say this phrase, no, you need two to tango. You need two to tango. Well, sometimes I think that you need two in order to be able to make international crime.
That's fascinating to me. Enrique, let me ask you this. Do you ever see a situation that could exist in Mexico where the cartels wouldn't have this much control or influence in the government? Do you ever see that happening? Is it something that is even possible to happen?
I think it's possible. It must be done. It's also a fact that that participation has been increasing. And let me tell you why, because I think that drugs have been evolving. I think in the 80s, I think it was mainly like more marijuana and cocaine, no? So it's that was a type of stuff. But let's start with marijuana. So marijuana was, you need a lot of plantations and you need some agricultural work, and it's made it more complicated. Nonetheless, it was a good business, and so it started to grow. But from what I've been reading now lately about fentanyl, it has nothing to do with marijuana. It has nothing to do with cocaine. It's much, much, much more profitable. It's much, much more addictive and also much more lethal. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you and with the public that is going to be watching this is that this is such a big deal. This is such a big problem that we need international cooperation and many measures to be able to fight against it. The militarization by itself, it's not a solution. Let me share some information that I learned this weekend. I was in Guatemala with a group of Latin Americans, and one of the speakers through Zoom was President Santos from Colombia. And well, Colombia has been a country that, with the collaboration of the United States, has been able to fight against drugs. But his conclusion was that such a complex issue cannot be won only through militarization, that it cannot happen. And that it has to be with multiple measures. And then General Naranjo, who was also a very important figure in Colombia, he said that after this war against drugs, the last 40 years, we have more production, more consumption, and more violence.
Hmm.
So the war against drugs should not be seen only as fighting the cartels, from my point of view. It should also be trying to see how we can reduce the demand. The demand of whom? Of the consumers. It is such a profitable business that as long as consumption is still high, it's impossible to finish with the business. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight the cartels, that we shouldn't go against them, that we should not go against their money, but it's an impossible fight if we do not deal with the consumption. An example that I heard from someone is like if you're trying to take all the water away from a swimming pool only with some buckets, and still water is flowing inside the pool. It's an impossible job. So it is complex, and we have to collaborate. And it's an international crime. We have to collaborate between countries and societies.
No, I totally agree with that. And, there is such a demand for, drugs here in the United States. We've talked about this so often. Aside from just, shutting down the border and enforcing laws there as much as you can, there has to be education among our young people. They have to be educated about drugs so that we decrease to a great degree the demand here in our country. Because look, a lot of us, I've been touched by it personally. I had a sister that died of an overdose of drugs. I know so many people, young people mostly, unfortunately, that have just met a terrible fate because of their drug use. And it has to start here with education and decreasing the demand. There's no question about that. So I agree with that. And I think that's the only way we can get a handle on this, once and for all. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I really don't. But it should. It should start here at a very young level with our children.
I think so, and it's a problem of societies of today, and we have to deal with it. And we have, as you say, we should probably. It's many things. I mean, why are some people looking for drugs? That's the first question. No? What are they trying to satisfy? What void are they trying to satisfy? What is happening with our families? No, what is happening within our circles? And that's not only the U.S. What is happening in Mexico, worldwide? No, what are we doing with our children? What is happening with the world? So I mean, there's many questions that we should be dealing. And of course, sometimes it's much easier for politicians just to look for someone to blame. No, it's
Yes.
much easier to say, it's the cartels, or it's Mexico, so we should fight against them, and that's it. And the result is that it's not happening. And I think that what we should all be really focusing, how can we help our young people to have a happy life, a satisfactory life, healthy life? And that, I think, is much more complex, but that's really the solution. Now, I'm not suggesting that drugs will be finished. I think that's not going to happen. But then we should find what is happens in other places. I think that in Europe, I don't know if it's in Holland, for example, the government itself, the state, was the one that was provided heroin to the addicts. But then it's a good quality, it is certified, and of course, it's something that you do not have to go and buy from a cartel. So I'm not just suggesting that it's just stop consumption. It's also that probably the state, the government, should deal with it. And it's better for me to be able to go to a drugstore, a pharmacy, and buy some kind of healthy drug than instead of supporting the growth of the cartel. So I think we should open our minds and find other solutions, because what is important is that our young people are having a healthy and happy life.
No, you're so right about that. And to speak to your what you just mentioned in New York, they actually had vending machines out on the street with drugs in the machines, and they were trying to give a healthy drug out to the people. Methadone and some of these other drugs that supposedly supposed to help, satiate your appetite. I don't know if it worked.
Mhm.
It started and then they discontinued it because I think it was abused, but. I don't know if that's the answer either, but for me, it's really all about education, educating our young kids and letting them understand how lethal and how bad this could be and how, dangerous to their lives. And I agree with you. It has to be a worldwide effort. It's not only the United States, it's everywhere. It has to be a worldwide effort to stop the demand. Are you considering running for president again?
Well, I've attempted twice already. I
Hmm.
attempted twice. I mean, different levels, and I think it's something that, of course, it's in my mind, because I see that we have many problems, but we also have a world of possibilities. I mean, now I in a program, in a TV program in Mexico, just interviewed this morning people talking about artificial intelligence, no? And I find that this is
Hmm.
something that could probably help us to solve so many issues, to help us to get released about things that are very mechanic and we all do every day, and do much more interesting things. Or we can probably combat cancer and probably finish cancer in the next 5 years. So, uh, while I see this world of possibilities, I see sometimes a world of polarization. I see sometimes a world of just looking for who to blame and how to solve issues. So I mean, a long answer to your question is yes, I will still look for to become president in Mexico.
Well, I can tell you this, Enrique, and I have no, evidence to support this other than what I was told, but I was told by one of my guests that, Scheinbaum, the current president, met with El Mencho in Puerto Vallarta and was given $20 million or, a sizable amount of money to support her campaign. And, that's obviously, we don't want to hear things like that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think this is the type of things that we question here. Why is the government actually working with the cartels? And do you think that if the Mexican government had the will and said, you know what, somehow, some way, we're going to stop this, and they actually went out to defeat the cartels, could they actually do it?
Yes, but together, again, together. It's something that we must do. I mean, very close between the US and Mexico, because, I mean, we are the neighbors that have the biggest problem. Just President Trump, in this last meeting last Sunday, he said that Mexico was the epicenter, no, of the drug cartels in Mexico. And yes, and very respectfully, I would say yes, and the US is the epicenter of the consumption of drugs. So that
Yes.
means that we both are epicenters and that we both have to deal with it. Let me give you some ideas, not really numbers, but before having this conversation, I asked ChatGPT, what is the
Mhm.
profitability of fentanyl? It is probably 1,000 times, 1,000 times. So even if you go against a cartel or a group of Mexicans that are doing drugs, a new one will arise because it's so profitable. So again, we have to deal with the demand, with the consumption, and in a way, governments should be able to provide drugs to addicts, should be able to help addicts to overcome their situation. I guess that probably in the future we could even do drugs that are less harmful for people. They give them the high but not the lows, no, not the harm. But imagine a Mexican, a poor Mexican that sees such a profitable business. It's impossible to tell them not to do it if we do not fight this together. Mexico is still a very poor country, and especially we compare it with the United States. Within Mexico, there are even poorer people. And again, the probably the way also to solve this is to have an economy where we grow more, where we're more productive. And as President Salinas said in the 80s, when we signed the free trade agreement later on in the 90s, basically the 90s, when one of the arguments that he made when we were negotiating NAFTA, we say something like better sell you goods and services than send you people, no migrants. I will actualize that saying and say better sell you goods and services than send you drugs, no? So it's we need to work in this together. And the answer is yes, of course. We don't want a government that is in any fact, in any way, being suspected of being associated with cartels. That's terrible. It's terrible, but it happens. In the last elections, the cartels have been involved not only in giving money, but also in intimidating people to go and vote. This happened, I was very close to the elections in the year 21, and precisely in the state of Sinaloa, I knew about people related with the cartels kidnapping members from the opposition, kidnapping them for the weekend, for them not to mobilize people, for them to prevent them from voting, and then releasing them Monday or Tuesday. This is not gossip. These are facts. And unfortunately, yes, unfortunately, today's Mexican government, in many levels, has been involved with the cartels, and that is something that we do not deserve. And we do not deserve governments in Mexico that not only not combat the cartels, but are involved with them. This is something that should not happen. It doesn't have to happen. That's probably what I want to convey. This is something that could be changed.
Well, I can tell you this, to what you just said. I spoke to a guest a while ago, and he was kind of undercover from Mexico. And bottom line, he said to me, Michael, we're very poor here. He says, if I have a choice of or not feeding my family or dealing with some drugs, I'm going to deal with drugs. And you know what? I can almost understand that. I get it. Why do you feel that, Mexico is so poor? Why do you think, Enrique? What's the
Well,
reason for that?
probably exaggerated. It's as in the sense of so poor, there's a significant amount of poor people. Again, I don't want also to relate that you have to be poor to be get involved in drugs or in crime. It's We all know that today crime is also very sophisticated. So you also need accountants and lawyers and financiers and bankers. So, I mean, we also know that it's much more sophisticated. I think that we haven't been able to find a economic model that is sufficiently inclusive and that really that is able to provide well-being for all of us. It has improved. It has improved. We have advanced, but we are still far away from it. And that is why then such a profitable activity finds ground to be attractive. But again, even if we were richer, with a huge demand and such a profitable business, it will be difficult to combat if we do not do this together. But I mean, yes, we have to work together for Mexico to be a much richer country and that we have more resources to combat illegal activities.
Understood. And now that Donald Trump, President Trump, has labeled the cartel as a terrorist organization, do you think that's helpful? I mean, the last thing we want to see here, I mean, I know the cartels exist, we know the whole story. The last thing I think we want to see here in America is the United States taking any military action in Mexico against the cartels. We don't want to see that. I think the overwhelming amount of people here in this country don't want to see that. Do you think it was helpful him labeling the cartel as a terrorist organization, or was that basically harmful?
I think from my point of view, it's positive. In what sense? It is first, it's positive. I think that's a positive thing for us to know in Mexico, and for those people in the government in Mexico, and for those governmental officials involved with cartels, for them to know that is a huge enemy from the United States. No, that's something that will not be tolerated anymore. I think that is positive. I no doubt that that is positive. I have the conviction that some of the actions of the Mexican government against the cartels lately, especially the one of the capture and the killing of the Mencho, was mainly done because of the pressure of the US. I have no doubt about it. And I think that many Mexicans see that also as something positive. Having said that, I do not believe that militarization by itself is a solution because of what I said, because it's such a profitable business that you would need all the US Army in Mexico to be able to stop it. And nonetheless, it wouldn't be able to do it. So we have to go. These are things that should also be seen and thought in terms of economics, no? And supply and demand. And so if it's such attractive, it's so profitable, what should we do? Well, what we have been saying, we would also like to see the US president talking about the need to control, regulate, whatever, regularize. I've read some of these things from the US. The US has been also pushing very hard this issue about the prohibition of drugs, no, and against the fight against drugs, and I still recall, probably I'm wrong, but at the federal level, drugs are still illegal in the US. Nonetheless, the states themselves, which were the ones that were suffering the problem, were the ones that started to regulate in opposition to the federal government. And now, well, you see many states in the United States, California is one of them, where some drugs have been already regulated, they are legal, and that is not a problem anymore at that level, no? So why don't we find solutions for fentanyl, which is now much more dangerous, much more profitable? So let's work on that, and not only the militarization. So I appreciate that the President Trump is saying this a very important issue. That is good for us. I think that is helping Mexico, but I'm aware and I'm worried that he only deals with one way of the solution.
Yeah, and what I've heard consistently is that the only fear that any of the cartel members have is really being extradited to the United States. I mean, that's the biggest fear that they have. They don't want to know that. But let me ask you this: now that El Mencho, El Mayo, El Chapo, they've all been eliminated, do you think it's caused any disarray? Is it going to be business as usual? They'll take a little time to, readjust to that and business as usual.
We still do not know because, for example, in the case of Sinaloa, when El Mayo Zambado was captured, kidnapped, and then taken to the United States, it took a month and a half for really there to be a reaction, no, for there really to be a fighting between the existing cartels. So a month, nothing happened, but unfortunately, since already a little bit more than a year, there is a battleground in Sinaloa between the different cartels trying to gain terrain. No? So that is happening in Sinaloa. And so I think that it's still early to know. It's still early to know if something like that is going to happen in Jalisco or not. Some of the things that I've been reading is that, I saw one of your interviews yesterday. Well, I saw it yesterday. It was 8 days ago with this agent that you very, very knowledgeable, by the way, from the DEA. And he was talking something like this. No, this organizations work sometimes like franchises, so they already have bosses in different regions and different territories. So it doesn't necessarily have to happen that they all start fighting again between them. But at the same time, I suppose, and that's my instinct, well, there's always an opportunity to say, let's find out what is happening. So I think that temptation for struggle is there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be as strong as what happened in Sinaloa.
Hmm. Well, that's good to hear. Let me ask you this. You know, you have FIFA coming up, and I know that for at least what I'm reading, there's been a lot of cancellations now. People are very concerned about traveling to Mexico. You think that is a legitimate concern, or the Mexican government has that under control, and people shouldn't be concerned?
Well, many things. I used to be a Ministry of Minister of Tourism in Mexico,
Mhm.
and one of the things that I learned when I was minister, and I truly believe it, is first to convey to the U.S. public that we take this seriously. No? In Mexico, we really take this seriously. That the Mexican government is also taking this seriously because, as you say, the impact among many other industries could be very negative in terms of tourism. Um, so far, from what I've been reading, the effects have not been as negative as we expected or we were worried about it. Because I think that people haven't seen things that bad after those events of that past weekend, because there hasn't been an additional combat. Uh, because I think that many of these people are also now much worried. No, the U.S. is paying attention, so now we are at risk. So I haven't seen so far, fortunately for Mexico, I haven't seen a reduction of flights or cancellations that are really significant. I would still say that Mexico, in general terms, is safe. That what happened here is something also quite unusual. No, it's unusual. But as I was hearing from you the other day, well, you know some of those places, and many people said that nothing really happened ever, and it happened. But I think this was an extreme event. I mean, there's not many mentions, and so hopefully this is something that we can continue to work in Mexico. But again, for us, the security of Americans and for foreigners in Mexico is very important for us.
Well, that's good to hear. Very reassuring. You know, you you bring that up. Have I visited Puerto Vallarta so often, and some of my friends there will walk down the street and they'll point out all the pharmacies, and they say, you know, the cartels own all these pharmacies, and they don't want any disruption in business. And Puerto Vallarta is very safe because the cartels realize that tourism is important and that they own many of these businesses, and they don't want it disrupted. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think, I mean, I do not know by fact exactly that, but it wouldn't be surprising for me. Why wouldn't it be surprising? Because unfortunately, again, these people have so much money that they have to launder their money somewhere, no? And so, unfortunately, and that is why some of the things that we should also do together, and in that case, the United States is extremely helpful, and I know that it has been helping, is we should follow the money, no? It's these people at the end of the day, they receive a lot of cash and they have to put it somewhere, and they can put it in different businesses. And at the end of the day, those businesses are illegal, or at least their origin was illegal, and that's not fun. That's not good, because it's also, I imagine, it's also unfair competition. Imagine competing in a restaurant or in a hotel or in a drugstore against a cartel, no, in terms of your economics. They can lower their prices wherever they want, because for them that's not the issue, no. So it's unfair for a legal economy to have an illegal economy. It's unfair. It doesn't work. We should go against that. So I wouldn't be surprised. I was not aware specifically of that one, but I wouldn't be able to say no, that's not true. I wouldn't be able to say that.
Yeah, and that could be exaggerated. I mean, they say all these pharmacies are owned by the cartels. I mean, I didn't believe that, but I could understand, you know, I mean, look, when I was on the street 40 years ago, we looked for places to put our money also. So I understand, and I had legitimate businesses at that time. So I get it. But it would be reassuring to hear that, hey, the cartels don't want disruption here because they depend on some tourism also in some of the places that they own. So that would make sense. It's actually reassuring in a way, if you could understand that.
Well, I mean, it's here reassuring, as you're right. It's here reassuring, for example, if you're a tourist, because you know that if a place is peaceful, it's because there's already what we call these. How do you say, pass, narca pass? It's a peace, narco peace. No, it's because
Yes.
they already domain the territory, so there's no infighting. So you as a tourist shouldn't worry because there's going to be no fights. As a domestic citizen, from my point of view, I find that very disturbing because then you have two states in the same territory. No, for example, unfortunately, some of the things that have been happening is the extortion. I was telling you that the cartels are not only involved today in drugs, but in other criminal activities, and one of them is extortion. So it is not unlikely for these cartels to go to restaurants and require from them a monthly payment just for them to be able to work at peace. No, so that's a tax. That's a
Yeah.
tax that doesn't go to schools or doesn't go to water or to your streets. That's a tax that goes to criminal organizations. But you're right. From the point of view of a tourist, um, you would say that that place is at peace because it's already under control.
Well, I understand the extortion because when Italians from the mafia first immigrated into the United States, into the neighborhoods, they were extorting their own shop owners and their own people there, and that's really how they started to build whatever organization we had here in this country. So I get that. It's not right, but it happens, and we understand that. You know, let me ask you this: these do you think that the United States should continue to publicly be putting pressure on the cartels? Do you think that at the end of the day, I think you stated this already, but do you think it's really helpful that Trump should continue and just keep letting them know that the United States is putting pressure? And this is another thing. From what I'm understanding, a lot of the weapons and artillery that the cartels have are coming from the United States. And this is not reassuring at all. That's a bad thing.
Again, I believe that it's positive. It's such a big issue in Mexico. The cartels are so strong. And one of the questions that I also heard you saying the other day in the interview, well, how come the government cannot really go against them? Well, they're very strong. They're very strong. If they have probably a between 30 and 50 billion annual business, how many businesses, even the United States, produce 50 billion a year? I mean, it's huge. So how many resources could a Mexican government, dedicate to go against us, against such a profitable business? So in the United States, it's different because I think it's more diluted. It's not that it doesn't exist, but it's more diluted.
Mhm.
And my impression is that there's no cartel that really goes against the government. And it will
No.
be really overcome very easily. But because United States is also very strong. So what I think we need in Mexico is to weaken the cartels and strengthen the government. And by doing those two things, then you start to limit them. But while we do that, I think it's important for the U.S. and for the U.S. president to say, for us, is an issue. Sometimes in Mexico, it's very easy for people to say, well, you know what this guy is saying is terrible. This goes against the sovereignty. I have a different perception of sovereignty. And I wouldn't like for our Mexican government to use sovereignty as an argument to defend cartels in Mexico. For me, that is unacceptable. To defend an association with cartels with the argument of sovereignty, that is simulation. So, I mean, for me, sovereignty is a capacity of a people, a person, or a government to decide your own future. We cannot decide our own future in different parts of Mexico when those areas or those territories are under the control of cartels. Now, again, what I will insist is I would like that the vision of President Trump becomes more sophisticated, more comprehensive, that it also includes demand policies that will be accompanied with against the with the attacks against cartels. Something more comprehensive will definitely be much more useful and successful.
Yeah. Well, I know at one time Trump just recently had offered to send military assistance into Mexico, and Scheinbaum, I know, rejected that. And I, at that time when I heard it, I thought she was correct to reject it. I said, "Gosh, I don't see why she would want another country's military coming into Mexico." I kind of understood that. Um, so I would assume that you kind of have mixed emotions about that.
I mean, I think that there's I
Mhm.
believe, even though it's not recognized. I mean, I've seen some of these movies lately, Narcos, which is something
Yeah.
that is unfortunate. Unfortunately, it helps to understand the problem. I don't see any problem, of course, with the permission of the Mexican government, of having U.S. Deployments in collaboration with the Mexican authorities. From what I've been reading, I read a very interesting article in the Los Angeles Times some weeks ago, where there's no doubt that the Mexican army was assisted with information from the U.S. Some people even speak of a drone that was very high, watching the spot. That is the type of collaboration we want. I mean, I think we need it, and I think that our authorities, military authorities, wouldn't have any trouble in having that type of collaboration and assistance. That is different than when president says or implies, "I will send you my troops." Well, that's reasonable for anyone to say, "We don't need it." But collaboration, assistance, training, information, support. And at the end of the day, from my point of view, the clear message from the US government that they are not willing to tolerate this. I mean, I think that's positive.
Well, you know what, Enrique, it's really refreshing to hear your perspective on all of this. And I think it's reassuring to people here, my viewers especially. I've had so much communication recently since, I've had the DEA agents on and Annabelle yesterday and now yourself. People are really concerned. So it's very reassuring to hear from somebody like yourself that really has a great perspective on this and approaches it very logically. And I think everything you had to say was really right on point. I mean it.
Well, I thank you the opportunity because when you have such a big amount of subscribers and followers, that is important, I think, for your public to know that we take this very seriously. In Mexico, we're really concerned. We're very concerned. But we also believe that we have to be part of the solution. And if we collaborate with the US in all the different facets of this problem, we will be much, much more successful. We want societies to be healthy, to be happy, to be prosperous, and drugs and these cartels are harming both of our societies and countries.
Well, I have to tell you this. I've traveled. I've been very fortunate to travel this world. I've been, in a lot of different places. And we love coming to Mexico because the people are always so wonderful, always so courteous, always so outgoing. I mean, we really enjoy it. So I think, it's just very reassuring to hear that maybe things are under control and we could travel there and that, people like yourself have a handle on this. And maybe at some point it could be really kept under control, or maybe these cartels can be neutered to a point where, they don't have the influence or the power or the damage that they can put on the people, because that's really what it's all about. And I hope we can work together. And I think we've been trying in this country, in America, to reduce the demand. I don't think they're approaching it the right way. Enrique, in our schools, kids as young as 4, 5, and 6 years old are being taught sexual things that they shouldn't be taught.
Mhm.
And I'm saying to myself, why are they doing that to these kids and not teaching them about the dangers of drugs, the dangers of gambling, the dangers of things that could really impact them? Being a former member of Cosa Nostra here in this country, I saw this kind of damage. Why are we not educating our kids at a young age so that they don't have an interest in this or they're afraid of it? I've always said it's good to have a healthy fear of things that are no good for you. But that healthy fear has to be instilled in you through education. And I don't know why the government can't see it here and they don't just demand that it happens. This kind of education, I think it would reduce demand significantly if we started with our young people like this over a
I
period
agree
of
with you.
time, obviously.
I agree with you. I think that education, and I like what you said, a positive fear is always useful at any age. At any age,
Yes.
no, always a fear of being caught, the fear of dying, the fear of having a disease. I think, and it's real. No, these kind of drugs really, at the end of the day, they harm you. Um,
Yes.
and also to educate people that there are different levels of drugs with different effects. Not all of them are that bad. No, well, that's reality. It's better to know things and to know the difference. And I agree with you. And I agree that in today's world, some people are tempted to educate kids with some information that you will become of age, you will have an age where it will be useful for you to know. But drugs today, at the lowest, at the earliest, it's much better. The same is happening in Mexico. The other day I was in Merida, in the state of Yucatan, and we also found out about people, no, kids of 8 years, 11 years, whatever, already consuming drugs, cristal and whatever. And from whom are they getting those drugs? A small girl, probably she stole it from whom? From her father. From her
Yeah.
father. No, so again, our families, we should talk and see what is happening in our families. How can we help parents to become better parents, more efficient? There's many more things to do than to teach, as you say, some of this sexual knowledge at an age where you cannot do anything about it.
Well, Enrico, I really appreciate. I think this was a very productive conversation. I really appreciate your insight and perspective into all of this, and I hope you do to take the opportunity to run again for president. I think Mexico needs somebody like yourself, so hopefully that'll happen, and we'll move on.
Mike, thank you for the opportunity of talking with you. And well, you know about this business. You learned it. I mean, not this particular, but you know about the idea. It's a fact of life. And also, congratulations for now from this other side, helping us to see how we can deal with it.
Well, I appreciate that. One place we haven't been to yet that my wife wants to visit is Mexico City. So hopefully, if that does occur, we can be in touch and we can have a wonderful Mexican dinner together. I'd love that.
Let me know. I would like very much to do that. And I can absolutely tell you that Mexico City is one of the most interesting cities in the world. I have the opportunity of having traveled in many places, and I love this city. So you will love it. You will really enjoy it.
Well, I'm sure I will, and I'll look forward to that opportunity. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
My friends, I thought that was extremely interesting, but let me get right to the point. The gas business. Did you hear what he had to say? Importing gas from the United States into Mexico has been an extremely lucrative enterprise because they're not paying the taxes on it. Something that I was doing 40, 45 years ago. Extremely lucrative. In many ways, it might rival the kind of money that's being made on drugs by the cartels. It was fascinating for me to hear that. And I did ask him, because he did say, let me clarify that the Mexican government has to know about this. They're participating in this. Maybe they're even profiting on it. I don't know. But it was very interesting to hear that. And I also asked him, did the American government or is the American government in any way knowledgeable about this and quite possibly be profiting also? And he said he would have to assume that they are. So, what I went to jail for, what I paid huge fines and restitutions for, is happening right now in Mexico. They're importing the gas from here, selling it without paying the tax there. The government is profiting in Mexico. The government here in America, they're either looking the other way for some reason. Maybe they're profiting also. Who knows? That's our governments, people. Get used to it. We live in there's corruption everywhere. I don't care what government there is anywhere in the world. So Mexico shouldn't be the only one held accountable. We have it here in our own country, here in the United States. And of course, it's happening all over the world. What could we do as people? We're knowledgeable. We try to correct it. We put the right people in office. At least we hope we do. And we hope for the best. That's the best we can do. We can only control what we can control. But, making this knowledge, making people aware of what's going on is extremely important. So, there you have it, my friends. It's fascinating to listen to these guests and to hear what they have to say and to enlighten us in things that we didn't really know about. It's fascinating to me. I'm going to continue to do this. Hopefully, we bring you good content, both entertaining, informative, and every other way. So, thank you for tuning in again. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't hit the button, please do that. That's my birthday present. We're going to honor you in a way if we do hit the 2 million, and we're very, very close. So I think we can do it. How do I always leave you, my friends? Same way. Be safe. What more can I say? We're in a very dangerous world, people, and we have to be aware of what's going on around us. They're talking about possible missiles coming from Iran to California, where I live. I don't think it's going to happen, but who knows? You know, we don't only have to worry about that, but what's going on in our streets. Just please, ladies, you especially, the young people, be aware of your surroundings. It's very important. Be healthy. Why not? They say if you can live, you know, for another 5 years or so, you might, all of us, live a healthy lifestyle. If you can do that for the next 5 years, you may live to 100 and beyond that. So why not do your best? You only got one life here on earth. We have a life in the afterlife, but not here on earth. Be safe, be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. And I really mean that. Your neighborhoods, your communities, you know, your loved ones, your families. And yes, God bless America. And God bless all the people that are struggling today and suffering. And, you know, we don't want to see that. We don't want to see war in Iran. We don't want to see war in Mexico. We don't want to see it in Palestine, in Gaza. We don't want to see any of that. We live in a fallen world, and this is what we have to deal with. So we pray and hope for the best. See you next time. Take care.
All right, my friends, listen up. I've got some important news, I would say. You know, my private platform, the Franzese Family, it's over on School. We just now lowered it to $10 a month. We dropped it from 20 for a limited time only because this year, 2026, we're plugging in some integral, accessible, street-filled wisdom that you never heard of before. Inside this platform, I'm sharing very exclusive, never-before-seen courses. I flat out cannot put them on YouTube. They're too real, they're too raw, they're too deep. And if you're not interested in learning something, you're not going to pay attention to it. So that's where we talk strategy, life, faith, business, all from the perspective of a guy who's been in the life and now is out of the life. Our flagship course, The Modern Prince, my annotated breakdown of Machiavelli's The Prince, is up right now. And I'm telling you, this is life-changing stuff for anyone who wants to understand power, influence, and how the game is really played. And we're just getting started. In the very near future, and I mean very near future, my newest book, A Man's Man, and my entire ministry acronyms are all getting plugged into the School Family platform. If you want to grow as a man, if you want to be a leader, and if you want to grow in your faith, this is where you need to be. So don't wait. Scan the QR code on the screen or go to michaelfranzese.com/family and jump in for only $10 a month. Where are you going to get a deal like this? I'll see you on the inside because I'm ready to share, you know, a lifetime's worth of knowledge and wisdom and experience with every one of you.